Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jane Wee, and I am the Marketing and Communications Lead for Financial Services here in Asia. I'm very excited to be your host for today's podcast episode on blockchain. And that's coming from last year's release of the Perspective Report from Capgemini Asia Pacific Junior Talents. For some of our listeners out there, this report is basically a compilation of opinion papers submitted by Capgemini's brightest junior talents and executive leaders, covering a broad range of latest technology topics and interests around 5G, AI, smart cities, sustainability and CSR, and of course, today's topic around blockchain. Now, on today's episode, I'm super delighted to be joined by Sudhir Pai. Sudhir is the EVP and Chief Technology and Innovation Officer at Capgemini Financial Services SBU, plus three of our very talented junior contributors, who is Chang Yue Sing, who is based out here in Singapore, Fang Yun Hui, Patrick, based out in Capgemini China, and last but not least, we have Duncan Cameron, who is based out in Capgemini Australia. A very big welcome to all of you. Now, I'll start you off, Sudhir. Sudhir, I would like for you to sort of introduce to our listeners this very exciting but very broad topic around blockchain. So I'm happy for you to share with us your insights, your perspectives, and probably as well the industry landscape around blockchain that you wrote about within in your article, and perhaps a bit more of the insights around it as well. Sudhir, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jane, and it's indeed a pleasure to join the podcast today. Blockchain, what an interesting topic, and it's been there for a long period of time, and we all hear it, know it, and things have moved rapidly in this space. So maybe let me give a very quick view of the evolution of blockchain that I have seen for many years, and then particularly focusing on what we captured in the paper, as well as build on a couple of what's happening now in the market. Now, if you look at the evolution, probably it's a beautiful example of a full sine wave, right? So it started with the Bitcoin in the very early 2008, 2009, focusing on the crypto, quickly moved to the smart contracts, with the Ethereum coming into play. But the next era of between 2014 to about 2018 was all about enterprise technology. So how do we use technology that blockchain has to offer to build trust, immutability, and those things. So, and a lot of blockchain platforms came into play, which can provide further modularity and easy access to use. Things like Hyperledger, and even industry-specific blockchain platforms started to play in during that period. We know R3, B3I, and so on and so forth. So when this happened, in parallel, the big technology companies also started to invest in the technology, but their focus was mostly around offering blockchain as a service, primarily riding on infrastructure, security, cloud, data, those sort of area. So on one dimension, we started as a Bitcoin as a currency, then quickly moved to more of enterprise technologies, modularity, sector specific, blockchain as a service. And during this course, we have seen several hundreds of proof of concepts being developed across different sectors, counterfeit management, procurement management, trade finance, etc., etc. We also have seen emergence of many large consortia that have been formed, because one of the key thing in blockchain has been how do we effectively use blockchain inter-company or between multiple companies. That is where the power of technology lies, and hence we saw a large number of consortia. Now, what is happening now, particularly 2020 onwards, is that we are sort of back into currencies. We have seen a significant evolution of digital currencies in slightly different angle. Now it is more DeFi, the decentralized applications come into play. We have seen the digital assets tokenization elements that is coming into play. So basically, we are redeveloping a money market or an economic model which allows us to have more liquidity of assets available in the market, And for that, blockchain can offer a fantastic technology with less hassles about intermediaries, more seamless cross-border tractions, and so on. So there is a whole chain of sine wave from currency to technology, enterprise, sectorize, and now back into more on the currencies and assets side of things. Now, particularly in paper, I called out a concept which was interestingly, as we have progressed in this blockchain wave, blockchain has to be looked in conjunction with what we call a synergistic effect with other technologies that are around it. So it cannot be looked as a technology as a standalone by itself. And that's where within Capgemini, we developed this concept of decentralized future. So we believe blockchain is only an element or a part of decentralized future. Now, decentralized future meaning uh, everything can be in future decentralized. As an example, there would be a decentralized cloud where we can run our applications through internet or decentralized applications that we talked about earlier about DeFi, right? So more importantly, all these also are sort of a puzzle, the puzzle coming together along with open source that become integral part of decentralization, security, standards, regulatory compliance, data portability. So what we see is bringing these elements together and creating a decentralized future is where the world would be heading to, and not specifically looking at blockchain as an isolated independent technology. So just to conclude, 2 points. One is we are back into the wave of liquidating the assets, tokenizing them, crypto, NFTs, that sort of wave, because that is powered by decentralized technology. Second, we are moving away from just having a blockchain to solve everything to look at synergistic effect of different technologies more in the context of decentralized future at an enterprise scale, which combines open source, decentralized cloud, portability, and other aspects. So that's exactly what we think the market is heading, and that's what we opened up in this paper for conversation.
Thank you for providing a very broad insight as well as the current development around blockchain that you have kind of placed out there. Right now, what I'll be happy to do is to bring us into another insight around blockchain and how that's helping over here in China. And that's a very a very interesting thought around how technology, the usage of technology, and how that's bring that into solving real problem, society problem that we are seeing. So I'm very happy to bring on board Yunhui Fang from China, Capgemini China. So Yunhui, perhaps what you can do is introduce yourself to the audience and where you're based in Capgemini in China and what you do there.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. So hi everyone, my name is Yunhui Fang, and you can also call me Patrick. I'm from Capgemini, China, and I'm based in Beijing. Currently, I'm working as business analyst and UX designer, taking care of business analysis, sorting out customer journey, and aiming at enhancing user experience of product interaction.
Oh, that's great, Patrick. Now, just back to the article or opinion paper that you wrote around in the report where you mentioned how blockchain can save street food. Now, in your view, and perhaps you can explain or kind of share with us a bit more your opinion as well as the definition of blockchain technology, and as well how you believe that today blockchain is saving the street food situation here there in China.
Yes, sure. So when we are talking about blockchain, it is literally a sort of decentralized technology and a huge shared database, which has high security and high transparency. And it is really making a great contribution to build up the trust. So the reason why I elaborate my article is that I insist on believing that technology should not be far away from our daily life. Well, it should close to our daily life and make some real value. I was born in Beijing, and I really know that there are lots of street food when I was young. To be honest, it's really delicious. In my memory, street food is not only just a place to eat, but also a place for communicating, expressing emotion, and relaxing after a busy day. However, as I grow up, street food can hardly be found, especially in some capital city. One of the most important reasons is that customer or government do have a big question mark of monitoring of the street food, such as food safety, deal tracking. Due to the coronavirus, more and more people are unemployed, and seems like street food is a good opportunity to raise incomes and boost consumption for this family. And I realized that the nature of both blockchain and street stall are decentralized economy activity. So let's say if we record the both information and transaction data of all the stores in a certain city through a decentralized network while operating offline, people can apply to the store owner of a certain store by uploading their personal information, and they can also withdraw their stores at any time. The situation of the booth and the transaction are recorded in real time and uploaded the blockchain. In case of disputes, the liability can be determined through this data, and the blockchain technology can apply to the standardized management of the store economy. Besides, based on transaction information, we even can go further to see the quality control throughout the whole life cycle of food delivery. So think about it. If I'm a customer and I'm pretty sure the food is safe, delicious, and cheap, why not just have a nice try with your best friends and enjoy the street food?
Thank you, Patrick. I think that's a very real scenario that you just pointed it out, and it's very interesting for you to share that with our audience as well. Now, when you wrote that sometime in quarter three of 2020, you would like to share with our audience, now that we are in the first Q of 2021.
Yeah, I know there's some like street store owner they are trying to like make some use some online technology, and we also like mobile phone is really famous in China, and each owner may have some app to do some online work and to do some like data transaction and do some information sharing. So I guess that would be a good start.
All right. Thank you so much, Patrick. And over to Duncan right now. Duncan, can you just quickly introduce yourself a little bit to the audience, where you're based and what you currently do at Capgemini Australia?
Sure. So my name's Duncan Cameron. I'm based in Melbourne in Australia, and I work in the business technology team as part of Capgemini Invent. So primarily I work across digital architecture and emerging technologies with a strong focus on blockchain and crypto assets.
Thank you. Now that's very interesting. Duncan, I think I just wanted to kind of bring you to the article that you wrote in the report itself around what else can we put on the internet. Now, while this is a very broad topic as well, you did share, around what are some of the ideas that you had in the digital world, that one day perhaps blockchain could replace the need for organizations, and perhaps that could be a starting point for you to kind of share with the audience here a little bit more around the definition that you can share with us around blockchain. That's one, and as well as the elaborate around what DAO is, along with the association and tie-in of smart contracts and distributed ledgers.
Sure. So obviously a very meaty topic. So I'll try and condense it as much as I can. Blockchain, which I think we've already spoken about a little bit, is an application of distributed ledger technology, right? It's effectively just a database where we can store and validate data in different locations, right? And we call those locations ledgers, right? And what we do is we link these ledgers together and we create what we call a peer-to-peer network, which has enhanced security, increased levels of validation, and makes it very difficult to commit fraud on the network, because it requires defrauding multiple ledgers, and we require agreement from the network to process transactions, right? Effectively, the launch of the Ethereum network back in 2015 opened up a new layer for blockchain development, right? And the biggest advancement was developers could create their own tokens and their own smart contracts on the Ethereum blockchain. Now, smart contracts are basically just self-executing protocols that exist on the ledgers, right? If you input X, the smart contract will spit out output Y, right? And this, as a very simple concept, has matured rapidly over the past 5 or 6 years, and is now allowing us to construct what I call dApps, or decentralized applications, right? Which Sudhir mentioned earlier. These decentralized applications are powering a whole host of new platforms and products in the DeFi space, so decentralized finance, and also in the DAO space, which stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organizations. So I guess my opinion piece focused on the idea of a DAO, right? And I think the best place to start is talking about what a traditional organization is, right? Which most of us would understand quite well. In most traditional organizations, we tend to have hierarchical leadership structures, right? And those structures are accountable and responsible for decision making, right? And Capgemini is no different. We have senior leadership, we have managing directors of market units, we have an executive board, and of course we have shareholders. And we are accountable for all the tiers up and down that hierarchical chain. And generally what happens in traditional structures is we push decision making up the chain, right? And the more significant or strategic a decision is, the higher up the chain it goes. In the blockchain DAO space, in this wonderful world of decentralized applications, we're seeing that all these new products and platforms are effectively decentralizing decision making. So rather than having a hierarchical structure where you have single entities or single parties responsible for major decisions, we use things like smart contracts and even voting or consensus mechanisms to decide on these key decisions. And this is a form of decentralized governance. What basically that means is the members who use the platform, in the traditional world we would call these consumers, are actually intimately involved in the key decisions of the organization, right? And the critical success components of this new structure, this new DAO structure, is we reward our users, or our consumers as we would call them, for participating in governance, right? And we might use something like a new token or a crypto asset in order to reward people for participating in that governance forum. Now, most DAOs now leverage some form of governance token, right? This token can be traded on secondary exchanges, and we basically pay these tokens out to our users in exchange for them contributing to governance and helping us make decisions about the platform. Now, the example I spoke about in my article was obviously Bitcoin, probably the most famous blockchain platform that exists, but also one of the most famous applications of a DAO, right? Effectively, it's fully decentralized, it's autonomous, it relies on public consensus, and the processing of the Bitcoin network in order to provide its functionality, right? But in this case, the ability to transact Bitcoin and send and receive Bitcoin is the key functionality provided by the Bitcoin network, right? And it's nodes that process transactions. In the Bitcoin world, we call these nodes miners, but effectively we reward our miners by paying them Bitcoin, right? And this is a very simplistic form of a DAO, because in order to run the business of the Bitcoin blockchain, we reward miners for contributing the hashing power. Obviously, Bitcoin has matured and other developers have come along and they've significantly advanced the idea of a DAO. And now we have far more complex DAOs, right? And one example is a group called MakerDAO. They basically created a stable coin called DAI. It has a fixed value. It doesn't suffer the super high price changes that Bitcoin does. But MakerDAO also uses what I referred to earlier as a governance token. They call it MKR. And when users vote on the MakerDAO platform, and it might be a strategic decision, it might be a new product they want to introduce, or a new blockchain platform they want to introduce, the users actually vote on that protocol via a poll. They're rewarded for voting, and they become intimately linked to the strategic direction of the DAO, right? And this, I think, is the most important point to focus on, because in DAOs, or these new blockchain decentralized products, your users are making strategic decisions with the developers, which tends to flip the traditional hierarchical structure on its head, right? Traditionally, organizations try to preempt market movements, they try to preempt consumer behavior, and they try and market products or create market offerings to fit the future demands of the market. In the blockchain DAO space, we're seeing those strategic decisions are actually being created with the users themselves, right? And I like to call this the co-creation of value, because we are effectively creating value with our consumers and we are involving them intimately with the future direction of our business, or in the blockchain space, the future direction of our DAO.
Thank you, Duncan. That's very insightful stuff that you kind of mentioned over there as well. Would like for you as well to share, perhaps in your opinion and view, with that, what are your views around, what's coming up next in the world of Bitcoin and DAOs, in your opinion?
Sure. So, as Sudhir already kind of alluded, there is a lot of very, very exciting stuff happening in the blockchain world, particularly in the public blockchain world, right? The idea of decentralizing applications, creating decentralized financial protocols, right? I think the world of DeFi is probably one of the biggest areas to focus on in the next few years. For those who aren't familiar with DeFi, it's effectively a blockchain ecosystem where they are recreating traditional financial products like lending and borrowing and accruing interest and things like that. But instead of providing them through centralized banking infrastructure, they are provided through cryptocurrencies and smart contracts, right? For example, and I'll talk about MakerDAO again, the DAO I referenced before. If you submit Bitcoin as collateral into MakerDAO, you can basically take out a loan in a US dollar stablecoin and pay basically super low fees on that loan, right? Like talking 1% a year, right? And this is super, super exciting because the super low operating cost and structure of a DAO, because it's all smart contracts and self-executing, means you have very limited overheads to facilitate that loan structure, but it means that consumers can get incredibly low rates on loans, right? That 1%, 2% loan on a multi-year contract, for example, would be unheard of in traditional banks. But DeFi can offer those kinds of products, which makes it super, super exciting and presents, I guess, a new wave of competition to traditional banking infrastructure. The second point, and I guess the last point I want to make, is it's also super, super critical to talk about NFTs, because they have probably been all over the news. If you've opened up a newspaper in the past few weeks, you've probably seen some reference to an NFT. An NFT is a non-fungible token, right? And that basically means that only one NFT will ever be created and they are unique, right? When you create an NFT, it is unique and you cannot replicate that NFT. So what's exciting about NFTs is they are now creeping into the artistic space, right? And we're seeing NFTs as a unique way of distributing digital artworks like drawings and music, even GIFs and JPEGs, things like that, right? And basically what happens is an NFT is a unique token that's minted on a blockchain, and they attribute particular access and rights to the digital artwork. And what we're seeing is artists now creating digital artworks, minting NFTs, and then they are selling their NFTs via auction in the blockchain space, right? And they're going for, to put it bluntly, ludicrous amounts, right? The digital artist Beeple sold his artwork the first 5,000 days a few weeks ago for about 70 million at digital auction. Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, is currently selling his first ever NFT tweet with bidding up to around 3 or 4 million right now. And many other musicians like Azealia Banks and Ryder Ripps and things like that, they're looking at selling their singles or even their albums via NFT, which is going to create massive disruption to traditional music streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music, that now have to compete with more disruption from the blockchain space and more disruption from these decentralized applications and tokens.
Thanks, Duncan. Indeed, there's so much opportunities and areas that could be so far-reaching with regards to blockchain and all of that. Can you introduce yourself to the audience for our podcast series here and sort of highlight and share with us what you do here at Capgemini Singapore?
Hi, okay. I'm actually a data analyst doing Power BI work for Rio Tinto at Capgemini Singapore for about a year now.
So you're saying you contributed in a very interesting and insightful article around why Bitcoin and digital currencies are going to be the new norm. Can you explain and perhaps share your views and opinions to our listeners? What's your definition, perhaps for a start, around blockchain technology, and then dive into a bit of your ideas and your perspective, your opinions behind why your opinion paper that you've contributed, and where you believe that Bitcoin and digital currencies will be the new norm.
All right, sure. So to me, blockchain is just a giant database of transactions. So how I would understand it is just to compare it similar to how your Google Drive is, just that now this Google Drive is actually globally accessible to everyone around the world. And anyone, regardless of your race, background, language, religion, you can have access to this Google Drive. You can update information, you can get the latest information from it, and nobody can edit this Google Drive. So what makes blockchain unique or revolutionary as compared to traditional database is two things. So number one is decentralization. And what decentralization means is that there's no hierarchy of authority and everyone has access to it without the need for any KYC. That means now things can be done in a way that intermediaries are not needed. So for example, let's say your banking system, banks are intermediaries, and banks actually facilitate between the lenders and the borrowers. You need the bank for this to work. But right now in blockchain, you can actually see such kind of use case, especially in DeFi, where you can connect the lenders and borrowers directly without the need for any intermediary. So that's the first point, the concept of decentralization. And the second point is that blockchain allows the ability to transfer asset of value. So this transcends the internet revolution where we can only transfer information from one country to another or from one person to another person. But right now, blockchain allows you to transfer money. That is just one example of it. And Bitcoin is actually the first use case of blockchain. Now, if you talk about asset of value, this opens up a whole new world of possibilities because the whole world operates by exchange. And if we talk about the transfer of assets that have value, this opens up a whole new world of possibilities because now your medium of transfer can be anything you can think of. For example, I can transfer a tokenized shares to someone as a payment. I can actually transfer NFTs. So NFTs are a very popular topic in crypto recently, and use that as a collateral also. So you can think of all kinds of combination to do things, to do business and settle transactions in the real world.
Before we close off on to this session of podcast, I'd like to bring back Sudhir as well to give us, to share with us as well some of your thoughts and perspective around the future, what that might hold for blockchain.
Thank you, Jane, and fascinating conversation, very insightful discussion. Without repeating what my colleagues already said, maybe there are two thoughts here in what is coming next for us. So, the first and foremost, if I use enterprise lens, then clearly there is tremendous benefit of using blockchain. We heard about trust, security, immutability, and those type of things, right? However, I think where there has been struggle is to scale the blockchain programs and to build the return on investment and value. So I would think this year and probably next 2 years, most of the enterprises will focus on the elements of how do we make this work, okay, for different participants of consortia, adoption, regulatory compliance, and even to extent the interoperability and portability of several of these complex technologies, maybe across multiple chains or maybe coexist with enterprise solutions and whatnot. So I think the whole gamut of making it work at scale is going to probably continue in the next year or two. The second theme, which is going to disrupt, which Duncan alluded to, is what we refer to as the token economy, right? So basically, there's going to be a redefinition of currency itself. What is currency, including, as we know, 80% of banks, particularly you talked about Asia, and in China is leading the way on CBDC, central bank digital currencies. There's going to be a wave of fiat currency to digital currencies, mostly powered by blockchain. And as well, there's going to be a parallel economy developed through the native currencies, which are native to the blockchain, like the bitcoins and the rest. And you will be able to tokenize, be it through NFTs or be it to collateralizing the existing assets to the tokens, etc. So the whole raft of how we look at money per se and how we transfer stored value is going to be redefined, and the backbone of the whole redefinition of this exercise is going to be blockchain and characteristics of blockchain, including the consensus that we talked about, the smart contracts, and all those elements that will make it a difference. So basically, we have to understand that blockchain is a foundational disruption. So that means the applicability of this disruption across different sectors, in different use cases, different business problems are there. And hence, it is important to understand not just as a technology, but also the bigger problems that it can potentially solve. We also heard about street food example. We also hear increasingly for sustainability and ESG tracking, the use of blockchain as technology. So tremendous potential ahead right now, and we have probably crossed a lot of initial hurdles that we used to have in the years before. So it's the time for us to scale up and increase the adoption of this beautiful technology-led business.
Thank you, Sudhir. Thank you, Duncan, Yun Hui, as well as USA. I totally appreciate you guys sharing your insights, your viewpoints, and your opinions around blockchain with us in this today's session of the podcast of blockchain. Thank you very much for joining us today's session. To all listeners out there, thank you very much. Bye.